Good morning. My name is Ryan Paul. I teach history here at SUU, and I'm the director of Eccles Apex. And on behalf of myself and the entire Eccles Apex team, Kason Graff, Lauren Bird, and Kate Scherer, I'd like to welcome you to Strength Isn't Always Physical. I would like to thank the Eccles Foundation for their generous and continuous support of this series, Dylan Kirkland, the director of the STEM Center here at SUU, and the Provost's office for making this event possible. I'd like to remind you that today's conversation will continue today at 3 p.m. on Thunder 91.1 and on the Apex Radio Hour podcast. Drew Robinson is a former Major League Baseball player, current mental health advocate, and professional speaker. Born and raised in Las Vegas, Nevada, Drew was drafted by the Texas Rangers out of high school and went on to play parts of 12 seasons with the Rangers, St. Louis Cardinals, and San Francisco Giants organizations. In 2020, Drew miraculously survived a suicide attempt, resulting in a newfound purpose of helping others and destigmatizing mental health. Leveraging his tagline, "Strength Isn't Always Physical," Drew is dedicated to sharing his journey and showcasing vulnerability to prevent suicide and to promote mental health care. Drew currently works in the Mental Health and Wellness Department with the San Francisco Giants, where he advocates for player mental health and peer-to-peer support. After Mr. Robinson's presentation, there'll be a facilitated Q&A with Dylan Kirkland here up on the stage. And we'd also like to recognize Drew's mother, Renee, who's here with us in the audience. Please give her a round of applause. So Drew has had an ESPN Plus documentary made about him, and he's asked that we show the first few minutes of it. So we're going to do that, and then after this is over, we'll invite Drew to be here. And then, as you know, as I always say, it's my pleasure after this to welcome Drew Robinson to SUU and the Eccles Apex stage.
Everything about this story is so improbable.
Is there any theory of bleeding?
So impossible on paper that I'm lucky to be alive.
Is there more than one wound?
How lucky am I?
And sir, what's your first and last name?
With his first big league hit and making a home run.
He's not great.
That's a double.
Get the police! Got blood on the floor?
29-year-old Drew Robinson is trying to make an extraordinary return to Major League Baseball. And his biggest obstacle is not his body, it's his mind.
This is my first time really talking about it. I'm here to tell anyone that mental health battles and disorders do not define who you are as a person. Your mind is your servant, not your master.
But Drew's comeback goes far beyond baseball. And even beyond himself.
We can all struggle at times. Doesn't matter who we are, how perfect our life seems to look.
Why do you think you survived?
because I'm supposed to help people. This was a huge sign that I'm supposed to help people get through something that they don't think is winnable. I'm meant to be alive. I'm meant to be alive.
I'm so honored to be here. As was mentioned, I'm a former Major League Baseball player, current mental health advocate for the San Francisco Giants. Can you sit? Unfortunately, a suicide attemptee, but fortunately and obviously a suicide attemptee survivor. I'm passionate about sharing my story and my life journey with everybody because I learned the hardest way possible just how universal struggles can be, and how it doesn't matter what kind of life you're living, what successes you've had, what you've achieved. Mental health battles and struggles don't discriminate, and as hard as I tried to hide that and act like that wasn't the case, I learned the realest way possible, in the most severe way possible, how likely it is. And so my passion is to share my story in hopes to be a reminder, be a signal, be a starting line for somebody, or an extra encouragement to maybe start their mental health journey, or to hear from someone who had to learn in a way that didn't need to happen, to maybe start their journey and get the help that they might be needing, because it is something that can hit anybody no matter who you are and where you come from. So my goal is by the end of this, you feel that encouragement in a more empowering and proactive way, rather than unfortunately what happens a lot of time because of the stigma, being a hesitant, scared, uncertain, I'm different kind of situation. So as it was mentioned, I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was fortunate enough to play baseball most of my life and grew into that prospect to be drafted by the Texas Rangers at the age of 18. And being able to play parts of 12 professional seasons with 3 of those at the major league level, my career and really my life turned into another reminder of how things don't always go as planned, because although being in the spotlight is something that just comes with playing ball, most people know me these days for my personal struggle with my mental and emotional health that led to that suicide attempt that ESPN and I released publicly and documented publicly to, again, help others avoid getting to that place that I experienced and starting their journey more preventatively. It ultimately turned into a position with the San Francisco Giants after making a comeback and playing one season after everything that happened, turned into a position with them called mental health advocate for the San Francisco Giants. And really what I do is just try to be the bridge, the starting line, like I said a second ago, for a lot of players and coaching staff that, as we all know, in a masculine environment, try to tough everything out every second. And it's something that is just unneeded these days because of the outdated stigma that is unfortunately costing too many people their lives. So I think for context, it's something to start with that really starting where my life started. Are you done? Can you sit still? And I'm going to share a lot of my insecurities, things that I experienced in a negative way, but I always like to share that my life is not all bad. It's something that I've learned, that I'm learning to take appreciation for and realize how good I had it. But that wasn't the case for a lot of my life. And it starts with some context that I think is important to share to paint a picture of what got me to where I got to. And so really being the youngest of 3 children in a household that was constantly split or constantly divided. All I knew, my parents got divorced at the age of 9, but really all I knew was them not being right for each other, and something that I noticed that they were just trying to make work for me and my siblings, which again I had appreciation for, but it was something that I kind of knew was kind of was something that they were struggling with. And this kind of led to me kind of realizing, paying attention to the stress and the dysfunction as, man, like if I wasn't here, maybe they'd have more time to work on the relationship. Maybe they have more energy since they don't have to care for me and my siblings to work on the relationship and find the love that they are looking for, or maybe have the guts to separate and find someone else sooner in their life. And so this imprint, or this experience, was really the first imprint that took hold on my subconscious and feeling like an inconvenience in most situations, and something that not only did I feel like an inconvenience, it was either feeling like an inconvenience or I picked apart and noticed the inconvenience in most situations in my life. And it wasn't something that just was when I was a kid. Unfortunately, I wasn't aware of it in any given moment most of my life, but looking back as a teenager, as a young adult, and even as a grown man playing professional baseball, I still had this habit of finding the inconvenience in most situations, no matter how good something was, or feeling like I was inconveniencing and being annoying or doing something in a negative way for the people around me, which just isn't the case. It did prompt me to work really hard to not be that inconvenience, which kind of came out in laughter and joking and being a good friend and being a good person. And unfortunately, I didn't see that as what it was, which was just being a good person. The other imprint that I really experienced growing up in the way I did was being that youngest of three. I grew up 4.5 years younger than an older brother who was really a physical beast of a baseball player and really an athlete. And he was kind of a national prodigy, being bigger, faster, stronger in his age group. And me, the 4.5-year-old younger brother, in my age group, I was the exact opposite. I was always the smallest. I was very athletic, but I was very small, weak, and what I felt like behind the 8 ball. And so it's hard to see someone I was looking up to and around at all times being the best and being talked about and being idolized and idolizing in myself, while I wasn't able to experience that kind of success in my sports. And so the real first experience of not feeling good enough really took place growing up in that shadow. And it's not something that I share to, again, look for sympathy, because it did shape me in a lot of good ways as well. But those are the kind of things that really weighed on me and followed me into, again, teenage years, adulthood, and unfortunately manifested into a pretty negative and pessimistic mindset on a life that a lot of other people would want to be living. And that's something that I judge myself for most of my life, and it's something that was the key contributor to my fear and my insecurity leading up to that suicide attempt. I was well aware logically that on paper my life is great. Although I'm not exactly where I wanted to be in my baseball career, I was on my way. I was in the room, and I was able to play Major League Baseball, even though I wasn't that Hall of Famer, the All-Star, the starter, the World Series champion. I was still able to experience some things and on paper have a supportive family. Although we were divided, we were still very loving and caring about each other. I had a great group of friends that I knew for a very long time. At the time, I had a very supportive fiance. So again, on paper, why in the world am I feeling this way? Those are the questions I asked myself over and over and over, and use as fuel to judge myself, because I just didn't have the strength to ask for help. And that's part of the reason why I title my presentations as "Strength Isn't Always Physical," but it really is just a quote that popped into my mind one day when I was trying to think of a quote to write on my gym's whiteboard for a week. And it's something that came out, and this was after my suicide attempt and after I survived and had a pretty miraculous experience. And it's something that just stood out because being a male, being the athlete, the physical side of life somewhat was God-given to me, and it's something that I worked very hard to fine-tune, but to some degree it was something that it was easy to me. But the hardest part about life for me is admitting that I need help, is admitting that I have insecurities and I don't have all the answers, even though I want to act like I do, and I want to act like I'm impenetrable. But as we all know, life gets really hard, no matter what the reason is. We can all think back to our worst day, our worst stretch, our worst year of our life, our worst day, and it doesn't define our life, but it's something that we experience, and it's something that for some reason the norm has been just tough through it. Don't act like it's happening. Don't let other people know it's happening. Don't ask for help. But what's the point of doing that if it's something that's going to lead to something that I learned becomes a life or death situation? And unfortunately, too many people get to that point. So that's why I'm so passionate about this, like I said earlier, because it really comes from so many different ways. The way that we talk to ourselves and think to ourselves and invalidate the way we're feeling at any given moment is just not needed anymore. So my first challenge to you guys is to really pay attention to what you're thinking within those hard times, and see what your mind is trying to justify internally and telling yourself internally, because I think something that I still experience to this day is validating and justifying some pretty extreme takes, and logically maybe it doesn't feel correct, but internally I can find all the excuses in the world, or all the reasons in the world to make it my reality. But that's the first encouragement is to pay attention to it, but then talk about it and share it with somebody. I know it's not comfortable, but there's something that I experience on a weekly basis within my therapy sessions, is going through a week and again feeling that internal justifying or feeling a belief that something is a certain way. And I go to share with my therapist because that is the way that it is. And as I'm sharing it, just the physical act of hearing how I'm saying it, 9 times out of 10, I catch myself and I realize, yes, that felt true and it has felt true, but hearing it, I realize that's not really how I believe to live my life, or that's not really how I want to view the world, because it's not that extreme. Or maybe it is and you find ways to get through it, but I think just the physical act of talking about it is something that does allow a little bit of release within those really tight beliefs that we hold internally, because as we all know, a lot of times within this realm of the world of mental health, it is something that's untalked about. And so again, my main message is to talk it out. It sounds very elementary and basic, but I've seen it over and over again being a mental health support within the organization and getting to work with a lot of people that I was teammates with for years before and knew them pretty well for 3, 4, 6, 7 years before. I've heard them talk about things in a different way and gotten to know them in a deeper way than I did all those years before. And hearing someone have the trust to say, I've never told anybody this before, and then share, or actually I related something to you that you shared in your documentary that I heard you talk about publicly. It's something that allows a level of connection that really it goes unmatched. And I share that with the example of my teammates, but also even my friends I grew up with, my family. Something that I gotten to do is get to know them more in these last 4.5 years after my attempt than I did the 27 years before, because there was a willingness to just let my guard down and just be the person I was, which at times is a very loving person. And so I think the other thing with mental health is it doesn't need to be your entire identity. I think that's the misconception that I believed at certain points in my life, sometimes even fall back into, but it's something that I hear pretty often, is that is just who you are. I am depressed. I am OCD. Why can't we change the wording to I experience depressive symptoms sometimes? It feels cliche, it feels kind of corny, but it allows a little bit more freedom within your experience and not such an identity-based belief, because you might feel depressed at times, that's true, but maybe you have some other strengths that are also happening at the same time. And so one of the things that my therapist and I talk about a lot is, it sounds again kind of cheesy, but think of yourself as a big boiling pot of soup. There's a bunch of ingredients. Sometimes we accidentally make it a little bit too salty. Sometimes we make it just right. But there's always so many different factors that are happening within our life. And sometimes we just accidentally fall victim to just focusing on one thing that's taking up most of our life. And again, sometimes it's fair because our entire life might have led up to that moment that caused us to have a bad day or a bad week. So that's fair, but can we have some acceptance that that's going to happen, and instead of having an entire identity-based attachment to it, because it's not true, realistically. So our identity is something that can't be taken from us. It's the way that you show up in your work and in a friendship, in a family setting. So I was a baseball player, but my identity was not a baseball player. My friends, my teammates, they don't remember me as the baseball player. They remember me as the kind of person I was within that baseball environment. So a lot of things that I talk about remind me of quotes. And so for this example, I think of the quote that people won't always remember what you say or the advice that you give, but they'll always remember the way you made them feel. And I think that's a true statement when it comes to that identity-based thinking, because it's true. Another quote that I lean on, and it is really the one that I try to live by the most, is just trying to heal loudly to prevent others from dying silently. That one obviously hits home for me because that's really what I'm doing these days, and I think that's something that we can all be doing, whether it's big or small acts. It doesn't need to be this life-changing, overnight, complete lifestyle change when it comes to taking care of our mental and emotional health. It's something that we can start small and start incorporating in our day-to-day life. And so back to the identity topic, it's the idea that we have to, if we're talking about our mental health and all of a sudden that's all we're going to talk about, we're going to be the guy. Like me, sometimes I even fall into this, the mental health guy's coming up to talk to me. That's not the case. And so having these small acts and incorporating into our daily lives. And so I like to talk about it in a way that I still like to quote funny movies with my friends. I still like to look a certain way. I still like to, talk some crap every once in a while to my buddies, and still be that person that I was. But then I also just like to mix into that person that is already there. Again, another ingredient with that pot of soup. hey, can I ask you if you're doing okay? We haven't really talked about it. Hey, brother, who's this big macho, burly man of a dude, like, just want to let you know we've been through a lot of things together, and I just want to let you know I love you real quick, and then we can get back into giving each other a hard time or whatever our relationship is like. And so that's my encouragement to you guys, is to start slowly incorporating it into your day-to-day life and making it a more normal conversation, because as someone the last 4.5 years that has been doing this, I can't tell you how many times people say, yeah, me too, or yeah, I experienced that too, or yeah, this feels good to share for the first time, or yes, I need help. And so, again, the small acts, the opening of doors, the planting of seeds, because a lot of times when it comes to mental health, there might not be a readily acceptance available for somebody. So I say that because as a support perspective, there's times where I just want to make sure that it's known and the door is open, not in a cliche way. Like, I don't want to just sound like a guy. Like, no, like I'm here to hear you out if you need anything. But a lot of times that person might not be ready for it because it's not normal. So walking the walk and being that exemplifying what it's like to be that support is something that can take time, but it's something that is always remembered. And so I say that because for that example of, hey, Chad, I want to let you know, or my big brother, just want to let you know, I'm always here for you if you need anything, if you ever need to talk to somebody, a non-judgmental ear. A lot of times it's new and it's not the norm that there's a programming that comes up that's just the yeah, I'm fine, the yeah, things are good kind of response. And he's like, oh no, everything's fine, everything's good. And then a week later, I get a call, maybe not from him, but it's the same kind of concept that, hey, that time that you asked me if I was okay and I just said yes, like, I felt like I was, but I'm kind of realizing I've just kind of been thinking about it. I could use some help. I know that you've been through this. I know that you are open to this. And so that's something, again, it doesn't take a suicide attempt to be that person. That's on top of the regret of actually attempting, the regret of not asking for help and not having the strength and the willingness to ask for help is probably my biggest regret, because there's the same amount of resources that I'm receiving now were available before then. And so that's what I mean by I didn't need to take a suicide attempt to be a supportive person, to be willing to receive support from somebody, because again, we're all a lot more alike than we realize, and the context of what's causing our struggles is going to vary, but the internal feeling is something that's going to be very similar, because at the human level, we're all just feeling the same. We're feeling the same chemical reactions that make up our emotions, just on different levels from that external circumstance. So I like to use the example that the richest person in the world that you can think of and the person that we see on the side of the road, both those bodies create the same chemical reaction that make up the emotion of worry. The person on the side of the road, theirs might just be coming from where their meal's coming from, or where they're going to be sleeping that night. The richest person, that body is creating the same exact worry feeling. His might be coming from where an entire company depending on him and his decisions. And so I share that because if we just take the context out of it, we can realize that all of us are a lot more alike than we realize, and being able to support each other and being there for each other and being willing to help, or being willing to admit that we need help, is not an abnormal thing. It's something that we need to be doing more, because unfortunately, it can become a life or death situation. And I almost lost my life to an incredibly outdated stigma that I've experienced a level of relatability with people that I never would have experienced in my life. I used to not be able to talk in front of a small group of Little League baseball players when I was a Major League Baseball player, because I was so nervous that I was going to sound dumb. And now I get to do this because I relate to people, because I realize that I'm just like everybody else. Another example of this that I experienced was a time that I went and spoke to a very high intense state penitentiary prison in California, the San Quentin prison. I remember going into it thinking, what in the world am I going to be sharing with this population of people that are going to be in prison for the rest of their lives? How can I help? So the level of skepticism, nervousness, closed-mindedness, while also being honored and grateful that I get the opportunity, and interested and intrigued, I never would have thought that I would be experiencing the strongest level of relatability with somebody in that group than in my entire life like I did. I gave my presentation. During the Q&A portion of it, the person asked me about the topic of regret and answered it, and before you know, we're going back and forth, and in front of a group just like this, an inmate who is going to be in prison for the rest of his life, bawling and I'm bawling on stage in front of everybody because we're relating on the topic of regret. Again, the context is different. His is from a very extreme one. Mine's from a very extreme one, but completely different. But we're at a human level relating on a level that I never would have experienced. And so it's a reminder that we're all a lot more alike than we realize. And being able to share our struggles and being able to ask for help is something that won't be misunderstood. It'll be something that might be new to somebody, but having the confidence and the willingness to be vulnerable with somebody will give you a level of confidence and acceptance and freedom that you might not realize you've been missing your whole life. Because as someone who was faking an idea of confidence that I thought it was my entire life, being able to admit that I need help, being able to be vulnerable and authentic in certain situations has freed up this level of confidence again that I felt like I was always faking my entire life. And that's simply just me being myself and learning the hardest way possible why it's so important to be myself. And so I hope that me healing loudly will ring true to somebody in here, whether it's you personally or someone you know personally, or just maybe the next person you come in contact with and realize that maybe there's an opportunity to help. It takes a small act, maybe a 30-second conversation, a 30-second offer, and then you get back to your normal day-to-day life. But making it a normal thing and having a level of confidence and bragging tone to it, because again, of course I do. Life is hard sometimes. Of course I go to therapy. Why wouldn't I? I need help sometimes. I'm just like everybody else. Instead of having the hesitation of, yeah, I go to therapy, but I promise I'm not crazy. Just having that confidence that, of course I go to therapy. Life gets hard sometimes and I need some help. I encourage you to do the same. So exemplifying it, walking the walk, being the person that's willing to show that it's okay to not be okay at every second of your life. Living like you are every second of your life is a lie and a way to experience exhaustion like you never experienced before. And I can attest to that. So I hope that if you don't get anything from me, from the solo part of this, I hope that you hear me when I say that people would rather hear from you than about you. No matter how misunderstood you feel like you're going to be, how judged you feel like you're going to be, how irrational you think you are, dramatic you're being, people would rather hear about those struggles, those irrationalities, that exaggeration more than they would rather attend your funeral. So if you don't hear anything that I said today, I hope you hear me when I say that people would rather hear from you than about you. And so I thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to getting this conversation with a high school friend of mine that I highly respect, and I can't wait to get into it. So thank you guys so much.
There we go. Thank you, Drew.
Of course.
It's always hard for me to hear, but I respect you more for it. And it's incredible. Your journey has been incredible. Every time we get to talk, I feel more inspired by you. So thank you. Thanks for coming here today. I had some questions here, and Drew and I both talked and decided that I didn't want to share these, right? Before we even talked about this, we want these to kind of be real and off the cuff. And I'll start with the first one here. I've never really met anyone who didn't feel respected or cared for by you. You're drafted in the 4th round, 2010 MLB draft, right? You played for the Rangers, Cardinals, the Giants, 9 home runs in the majors, 118 career home runs. Your beloved friend, son, brother. It's clear to me that your biggest hater has always been yourself. What steps have you taken to love yourself?
Love that. That's the most Dylan worded question. Yeah, I mean, that is something I didn't really get into the post part of my attempt too much in that part, but yeah, that really was the thing I was struggling with the most behind closed doors for some reason. No matter how good of a friend I was, how hard I was trying to be a good person, for some reason when I got home and when the noise stopped, I believed that it was an act instead of actually who I was, and there was a level of hatred that just was so unnecessary and not real or not true. But I think the main thing that I do now is to have a conversation with myself or think to myself or do things for myself with the understanding that it is a relationship as if it was somebody else. And it sounds, still to this day, sometimes it sounds corny to me, or it sounded incredibly corny when I first started doing it, but having conversations with myself, having some mirror time in the mirror, I just call it mirror work, but the amount of times that we're looking at a mirror, we can have a quick conversation with ourselves or just a quick affirmation, or just, again, the acts that we do out in the world of doing them a certain way, which most of us like to do as a good person. doing it because it's not an act, but because that's who I am, and having a level of acceptance. So I think it starts with a level of awareness that I am a good person. But having myself believe that is something that is a challenge. And I think, again, that's an example of how far things can fall. But I think what I do now is, again, those acts. And so I think of my trifecta that kind of is what I believe spiderwebs into all these other things. But regular exercise, regular therapy, and regular journaling are the three things that I found is the most efficient for me when it comes to taking care of myself and filling my cup. And a lot of those, within those, again, spiderwebs and other things, but a lot of affirmation work, a lot of mirror work, a lot of self-talk, and thinking to myself or talking to myself the same way I would to somebody that I love. And it sounds obvious, but a lot of us don't do that. And that's where that self-talk comes into play, because for some reason it feels okay to talk to myself, or maybe other people experience this, talk to ourselves in ways that we would never talk to another human being. And so it really kind of starts with catching myself and realizing that I am somebody that deserves love, just like I try to give to other people that I love.
I love that. Another question I had for you, if I remember correctly, you still have the bullet from your suicide attempt. Is that correct? Why?
Yeah, it's just something that after my attempt, I had a very strong shift of, I can't hide anything anymore. Or it was a strong shift that came from me not being able to hide anything anymore. So I felt this level of freedom for the first time in my life to be who I was, which is a very emotional person, good and bad. At times I'm emotionally triggered and emotionally reactive rather than responsive or listening. But I experienced a level of authenticity by being able to receive the support and love that I got and being my most authentic self. And it was something that, again, it didn't need to take that, but I thought of it as something that could be reminding to where I was at a certain point in my life and how I acted and how I didn't want to be acting anymore. And so, and in the physical part of it, it's just something that I thought was powerful enough to keep because I survived something that I should not have survived. On paper, anatomically, all the doctors, everybody has told me I shouldn't have survived the 20 hours that I did before being attended to. And so I look at it as a reminder of kind of where I was in my life and how I was living my life that I knew was not serving me anymore. But if I ever kind of forget it, then that's something that I can maybe use as some fuel to not fall back into those old habits and those old thinking patterns that I did before.
Something I remember you telling me is you said you held it between your fingers and just thought, like, this couldn't get me down, right? Like, this is the thing that couldn't stop me, right? And that's so powerful to me. Let's talk about your sense of humor a little bit. Interviews, podcasts, you always find a way to make a joke or laugh about missing your eye, right? How does this sense of humor keep you in a good place? And on the flip side of the coin, how does it harm you?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because, yeah, it's something that I've used as a defense mechanism or as an avoidance tactic most of my life. But again, the perspective of looking at things a certain way is where the key is. And so it's true at times I use it as deflection, avoidance, but it's something that became a skill of mine and something that adds to maybe charisma or the ability to connect with another human being that I care about, or maybe lighten the load for somebody who might need a joke or need a laugh in their life. And so I look at it with the understanding that sometimes it probably wasn't that needed, but it's something that I can accept that it's just another strength of mine at this point. And it's something that I think in specific to having one less eye and opening that door to humor, I think it's something that lessens the load or maybe the hesitancy of someone who's conversing with me or around me that might make, you'd be surprised how many times an I is mentioned, I jokes, or not even I jokes, I statements are mentioned in a day-to-day basis.
What's worse is shooting statements even.
Right.
I was we're talking back there and I say, like, we shoot for the hip or,
yeah.
You know, like I need a hole in the head. Like,
and so I do it.
Somehow you find it funny always.
Well, I don't, I mean, I do it in a way to try to comfort the people that I'm around. So if someone says in 2020 and I say, well, 20 hindsight, I try to share that in a way to help them not have a sense of second guessing themselves if they said something insensitive when the conversation's done. And so again, that's where the perspective of like, yeah, maybe it can be inappropriate at times, but I'm doing it from the goodness of my heart in an act to try to take care of the people I love, which again, it's just a perspective. It's not right or wrong. Like, that's not the thing here. It's more just like, I'm just trying to do something to try to lighten the load and make life a little bit less heavy at times. And so the amount of times, especially in baseball, there's a lot of I statements. And so just to make sure that no one's uncomfortable around me when this happening, I'm able to keep light of it. And that's something that I enjoy myself. I would rather be laughing than being uncomfortable. So I try to do that as often as I can.
I love it. I think that's awesome.
Keep your eye on the prize.
I want to talk to you a little bit about Ellie. Ellie's dog lawyer reached out to me. She was wondering why she doesn't have a baseball card yet, and if you could commit today to making that happen.
Well, she does have a baseball card.
Oh, okay, so
we got it.
Bad sources.
We got it signed up. Yep.
But I'm really wondering about Ellie, and I'm sure other people are. What's Ellie's story here? Like the what, why, when?
Yeah. So biased, but Ellie's the best dog ever. She just turned 8, but I got her when she was about 5 weeks old, and within a relationship that I was in before my attempt. And we had her older brother at the time from a different litter, and she was a normal house dog for the first 2.5 years. And during my the things that led up to my attempt, one of those things was calling off the engagement. And during that time, my ex took both dogs instead of splitting them up like we do now. And then when things kind of happened and she came back in my life for a little bit, and one of the biggest regrets that she had to live with was me asking if I can have Ellie back before my attempt. And so when my attempt happened, it's something that really weighed on her in an understandable way, but it's not the reason why I attempted, but it's something that she thought contributed to me going through with what I did. And so after the fact, when things reconnected and we eventually went our separate ways, she was willing to leave Ellie with me. And throughout that time, I made that comeback, and I played baseball one more season with one less eye and everything. And it just so happened that within that time of my attempt and that comeback, which was about a year, I had Ellie serviced, but I still wasn't bringing her about as a serviced animal yet. I was just kind of like, I'll see if this works out, but it wasn't happening. And then that comeback season, we just happened to open up our season in Las Vegas as a visiting team, which was, the stadium was 1.5 miles away from my house. And so I just brought Ellie in during practice for the first day with the idea that she would be picked up, and just want to let the guys meet her because she's a cool dog. And then they asked me to keep her during the game and then bring her back the next day. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to step, like, I don't know if the baseball gods are okay with this. I've never seen a dog in a clubhouse. I don't know. And then by the end of the series, the guys were like, hey, we heard that she's serviced. You should just bring her with us on the trips and throughout the season. I was like, yeah, okay. And then my manager actually called me and was like, I think you should consider doing it. And I was like, if you guys are okay with it, I'm doing it. And so the next day I prepared her for her first flight, and I haven't stopped traveling with her since. And so I knew it was something that was going to be helpful for me and I would enjoy, but it was really cool seeing the way that she seemed to help and boost moods for everybody else. And I just call her my natural antidepressant, and it's something that I don't know how I was traveling without her beforehand.
I love that. You bringing that up, a natural antidepressant, this is further down my list, but this fits in here. How does medication play a role in your healing?
Yeah, it's something that it's been interesting because I did take medication before my attempt. And that's another part of the story that when I have more time, I really do get into that. I was seeing a therapist before my attempt, but that's another thing that I like to talk on, is that I was looking for help, but I still, even though I was paying for the service, I was dedicating time, I still didn't have the guts or the strength to actually ask for help. And so I was seeing a therapist briefly beforehand. In the time before that, I had actually started a medication, but I was, again, so part of the stigma unknowingly that I was so hesitant and so embarrassed and shamed about it because I felt lesser than or weaker than, that I hid it. I even hid it from my fiance that I was taking an antidepressant. And so it's something that, again, the perspective has totally shifted, where I look at it as the same way that a person uses crutches when they have a broken ankle and they have a cast. It's something that can maybe help me through a hard time. It doesn't need to be a life sentence. It can, and if it is, that's fine. But it's just the perspective that has changed, that why wouldn't I try to give myself the best opportunity to be the best version of myself? And if that takes taking some medication that is proven to help some people, why not? And so, again, the perspective has totally shifted there, where I have gone through experiences with taking medication, and something that I experienced a lot of benefit at different times, but they ran their course, and something that now I'm not taking medication, but it's something that I encourage others, if they're willing to talk with a professional, see if there is a fit out there, if they're needing it, because again, the hesitation, it doesn't mean, what's the difference between taking a multivitamin and an antidepressant? It's just something that seems to help our bodies function in a better way. And so again, the perspective has totally changed that. if it's something that is a right fit for me, then I'm happy to take it, and I'm happy to share with others that I am taking it, and it's not something that I believe contributes to me being lesser like I used to in the past.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate that. Something a little bit more personal to us. We used to ride around Las Vegas on longboards and mess around. And I remember going to a skate park with you, and there was a kid on a BMX bike. And you were like, "Hey kid, can I ride your bike?" And the kid was like, I guess. And we were high schoolers, much bigger than him, right? And you ride around in the bowl on this BMX bike, and you do like a backflip out of the bowl and land it. And I was like, what the heck? I'd never seen you do anything like that. I didn't even know you could ride a bike. I mean, we would assume, right? Because you were already planning to be drafted, and that was going to go through. But at that point, I was impressed by your physical strengths. What do you feel like are your best emotional strengths?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays it's just being honest and transparent, I think, or vulnerable and transparent. I think throughout these last 4.5 years, like I said, I've kind of experimented with different thresholds of the amount of things I share, when I share, who I share it with. And that's why I said earlier that I don't need to be talking about it at all times. But if it's something that's weighing on me and it's something that feels out of line internally, then it's worth sharing. It's worth asking a different perspective or an outside opinion and something that can maybe be helpful. And so I think my emotional strengths is just being that vulnerable person that at times in the past felt like it would be a weakness, but really it's just another tool that's in my tool belt now, because again, for majority of my life, I was just always trying to be the guy that could tough everything out, get through everything, be the masculine, supportive, or provider. And that's all great. And that's another thing I like to talk about is like, you don't need to completely go from 100 to 0 on all these things. Maybe we can just tone it back down to a natural sweet spot that is more in line. And then when there's moments that you don't need to be that tough it out kind of guy. Maybe there's a time when my mom has the worst day of her life and I need to be a loving, supportive son. That tough it out, rigid person, masculine man is not going to be helpful in that situation. So adding different tools to my tool belt and being able to turn it on when it's time. Like I still like to go beast mode in the gym and then be able to come have a conversation with someone that I really care about who's going through a hard time. Again, being that adrenaline junkie, that masculine tough guy is not going to be helpful in that setting. So I think my biggest strengths is being able to be vulnerable and then supplement that or complement that with my other traits that I developed over the course of my life.
Thank you. One other thing I wanted to ask you about, and we were talking about this a little bit in the green room before the show, is your role with the MLB and working with the Giants right now. This is kind of a unique role. There are roles that have to deal with mental health scattered among the MLB in various I guess roles as like psychiatrists or psychologists and that sort of thing. But really, your role is super unique to professional sports in general. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So being more like a bridge and being someone who knows what it's like to be in their shoes. It's something that I kind of describe as, again, bridge, starting line, but another way is being like the translator, the mental health translator to the boys, and then being a baseball translator to our mental health professionals. And so having a full-time sports psychologist, clinical psychologist, and 2 mental performance certified coaches on our full-time staff within the organization is something that's new to baseball. And some teams are starting to get on board with this, but having someone who can be the bridge to let the guys know, like, who I just got done being teammates with again. So they see me as more of a peer, and then someone who's just kind of walking the walk of, yeah, I do go to therapy, but then I can also still come and turn on and be the athlete just like you guys are, and realize that there's benefits to both of those. Just kind of being that buffer zone between them while approaching them with baseball specific questions, asking them, being able to keep up in the language of talking about intricate baseball mechanics, philosophies, techniques, and then artistically weave in some mental health conversations. And then before you know, we're having a 30-minute conversation about their childhood, their psychodynamics, and hearing the phrase of, man, I've never told anybody this before, and seeing that kind of like light switch go off, like, it felt pretty good to actually say that. And then I can gently nudge them into the office a little bit more empowering, in a more empowering way rather than a debilitating way, or I can just continue doing casual check-ins and start to ease the transition into maybe getting some more helpful, encouraging work rather than, again, I think the thing that I wish didn't have to happen was an emergency response to mental health crises. And so that's why I use the word empowering, because I believe the earlier you start, the more empowering and curious and exploratory the the experiences rather than a debilitating, scared, overwhelmed emergency response. And so being that buffer, being the mental health translator or the baseball translator, the other way around, it seemed to be a pretty efficient role, and something that I take a lot of pride in, because I get to still get my baseball fix and maybe help out with the guys in a baseball sense, but then can be that safe space for somebody who otherwise might not be telling anybody that their life is in shambles behind the closed doors.
Your support relationships. I want to talk a little bit about your support journey from the time of the attempt to now. How do you feel like your support has changed, or I guess progressed over time as we get farther away from the attempt?
Yeah, I think it's something that has become a little bit more, what's the right word? Like, not as consistent, and not in a bad way, because it's something that, because of the work that I've dedicated or committed to doing, I have a little bit better filter or awareness of when I need it more than at the beginning. It was something that was also very traumatic for the people that were in my circle. And so there was an understanding level of jump to shower me with love and support. And at all times, the first couple months I was bedridden, couldn't do things physically because of the damage. And so someone was with me at all times in my house. And so the support has maybe physically shifted a little bit, and also within me just dedicating all my time to trying to be the best version of myself and finding some healing in my own journey. I've been able to dictate when there's a time that I need it a little bit more, and have a willingness to ask for it more, or just kind of share that this temporary phase is happening right now and I just need some space. But it's something that there's a understanding that I know when the time is, and they know when the time is, and there's this unspoken connection again, which I think was birthed in the beginning stages when we're just all an open book, and all we ever wanted to do is make sure everyone was okay, and had to learn that the hard way. But that's something that could have been happening much earlier in our life, and it's not such a crazy thing to be doing.
I want to ask you a little bit about some of those supports along your journey before your attempt. Like you talked about, this wasn't all bad. You had an impressive career. You were friends with many of these players and coaches. Could you talk a little bit about the support you received from coaches along the way that maybe have continued to help you through now? Yeah,
and that's the thing that, again, obviously my biggest regret is doing it, but the next biggest is just not letting anybody know really how hard I was trying to cover up this unrealistic version of myself that I thought existed. And I was, again, blessed with that many people and coming in contact with a lot of good people, a lot of good coaches, a lot of good teammates. And something that is, I guess, kind of bittersweet to hear, but something that I heard often afterwards was, man, Drew, like, literally thought you were the last person that would do this. We genuinely thought that you were nowhere near the place that you got to, and that's because of how hard I made sure that when I was in the setting, I wasn't being that inconvenience and burdening somebody that might need to take on my problems or fix me, when, again, that's not the way that it works. And unfortunately, I didn't know that, but there were so many people that, even with me hiding it and still had no idea, they were just still really good people. I was blessed with, because of that act of being a good person, which again, I've learned is not an act, it's just kind of who I was. I was able to really connect with those people even more, because the first things that I did, and really what I did for the first 2 weeks when I was still in the hospital in intensive care, was just be on the phone nonstop. So I think of one of my baseball coaches that I was with majority of my minor league career. After talking to my family members, he was the first person I called outside of family, to just let him know, hey, he didn't even know what had happened yet, but I just want to let him know that my life is better, my career is better for having you support me and be my coach, and I just haven't let you know how much I appreciated you. And just doing that and being able to do that with other people was something that went a long way, because for some reason I didn't have the willingness to tell them how much I appreciated them beforehand, or have the willingness to ask them for help beforehand, even though I knew that they would be willing to help me, because I guess I didn't know it in an articulated way before, but I knew that people would rather hear from me than about me.
I really just want to focus on one more question with you. I want to talk about goals. I was watching a few months ago, you were on the Pivot, popular podcast, and you talked about fake confidence and real confidence by being vulnerable. How has vulnerability helped you to set realistic goals?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I just think that there was such an effort to be confident in every situation, which, again, it's not all bad. Like sometimes it does, life, I do need to tough it out. There is times where I need to really just get my hands dirty and grind things out, because never doing that is also not going to be helpful. But I was so constantly trying to be what I thought a confidence person would be rather than just being confident. And it sounds ironic, but admitting that I don't have all the answers, or admitting that I don't know exactly what I'm doing at every second of my life, has given me all that confidence I was always faking. And so I don't know the science behind it, but I think there's just a level of realness or authenticity to that allows the most natural version of myself show up, which turns into confidence. And so I think vulnerability is something that can get a bad rap, and it does mean a form of weakness in certain situations, but it's really about just being willing to deal with the discomfort and deal with maybe a lesser position in certain situation, but then still being your most authentic self in that situation is really what confidence is. And it makes me think of another quote, but confidence is not walking into a room comparing yourself and feeling like you're better than everybody. Confidence is walking into a room and not feeling like you need to compare yourself to anybody at all. And so I think that describes vulnerability and confidence in the same token.
I think I speak for everyone. We like the most vulnerable Drew. We like this. We appreciate you being here, and you're my hero. So I appreciate you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.